Hey team, in this training, we're going to be talking about the sales foundation. And so this is going to be covering everything that you need to know from the principle of sales, what the different types of sales that exist, the common myths, and really understanding what is it that people buy. So that way you have a core fundamental understanding of the entire sales process, of what sales is, how you're going to be conducting sales. And this is going to be a very 30,000 foot overview into everything revolving sales. And then we're going to have specific trainings that go into the nitty gritty, into the tactical side of things. But for this training specifically, this is going to be a complete overview of sales foundations and all the principles that you need to know and you need to understand to make sure that you can be successful with sales. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump right on in. So the first thing that we have to do is we actually have to explain what sales actually is, right? We have to understand the process of sales. What does that actually look like, right? And like I said earlier, we're really going to be approaching everything from a core fundamental principles perspective, right? Because we can get into the tactics of doing quick chats and strategy sessions and 2-call closes, but really what we want to do is we want to teach you the principles and how they actually apply specifically to the whole sales process and what that is actually going to look like. So before we can actually dive into anything, the first thing that we have to do is we actually have to define terms, right? We have to make sure that we are on the same page when we are talking about sales. So when it comes to defining terms, right? What is sales? So according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of sales is the exchange of a commodity for money, right? Or the action of selling something. Now, the other definition of sales is the operations and activities involved in promoting and selling goods or services. All right. That is what the formal definition of sales actually is. Now, depending on the context, we have to actually define sales in various different ways, depending on when and how it's actually being used. All right. So in a transactional setting, sales is the act of exchanging a product or service for money. Right. It is a very direct transaction where the buyer gives money to the seller. Right? So if you were to go buy a cup of coffee at a local cafe, right, and you, the customer, will exchange money for the cup of coffee, which is the goods, right? Then in the terms of a process, right, when we say this is a sales process, then in the sales process definition, sales is a series of activities that begins with identifying what the customer needs, right? What the lead needs. And then at the end of the day, really walking them through and actually closing the deal and making a transaction. All right. So for example, a sales process would be the community strategy or the VSL strategy, and we'll show you exactly what that looks like. So on a side note, we want to make sure that we can actually define terms. So during the sales process, when you're actually speaking with people who are interested in your product and service, those people are classified with different terms depending on the sales process and where they're at. So the people that are interested in our product or service, or the people that we are trying to sell, right? We call those leads, prospects, potential clients, potential customers, and many other names. But those are going to be the ones that we will be using throughout the sales process. And the one that you will hear the most will be prospect, potential client, or potential customer. All right. That is the term that we're going to be using a lot. Okay. So after we have defined sales processes, right, then relational definition of sales, right? Sales is about building and maintaining a customer relationship, right? It's understanding the needs and the wants of the customer, providing value, and making sure that you have a loyal customer, right? So for this example, if you have a real estate agent, right, their goal is not just to sell a house and then be forgotten by the client, right? A successful real estate agent will stay in touch. They'll send them gifts. They'll send them cards. They'll remember their birthdays. So the next time that person needs a real estate agent, right, they're going to call the individual. And that is part of sales when it comes to the relational definition. All right. Now, when it comes to value creation, sales is the process of creating value for the customer. Right. And what we're doing is we're sharing the value that our product or service will create for the prospect, right? Or the potential client. So as a remote wellness practitioner, right, you're not going to be selling your sessions or the hour time that this person's going to speak with you. What you're going to be selling is the healthier lifestyle, right? A better version of themselves, a more confident version of themselves, and really the better tools so that the individual can be healthier. And that is where the value is actually created with what you are selling. All right. Now, the strategic definition of sales is the function that involves understanding the market, the competition, the customer behavior. And then this is where you're actually going to be doing market research, right? And what you're doing here is you're really trying to understand what is going on in the marketplace. So you're not just haphazardly going on the internet and trying to close sales, right? What you're doing is you're aligning your sales approach to figure out what the market needs. And quite frankly, when you're putting together your spice messaging, that is also a part of sales, because what that's going to lead to is you being able to sell more clients. So to sum it all up here, sales by itself, right? It's the exchange of a commodity for money, or the action of selling something, or the operations and activities involving in promoting and selling goods or services, right? So it encompasses a very, very broad aspect of things when it comes to sales. So specifically for us and everything that we're going over is we're going to be talking about the actions of selling something. That is specifically what we are going to be going over when it comes to the strategy session, the quick chats, because all we're trying to do is we're trying to lead the prospect to pay you for your program. But sales is actually bigger than that, right? Sales is actually a very big term, and it all depends on the context at which you're using that term. Okay. Now, moving along here, we're going to talk a little bit about why is sales so important. Okay. And so the way we're going to break this down is we're going to break this down both in business and in your personal life. So it actually has a dual benefit that you can actually see. So sales is actually everywhere, right? It's an everyday part of life, whether you like it or not. If you're pro sales or if you're against sales, whatever it may be, sales is a skill set that will help you navigate life 10 times better. And that is a fact, right? And once you master it, this is one of those skills that you will never go hungry ever again, right? If you get really good at sales, you can go to a company and get paid on commission at least a minimum of $120,000, $150,000 a year just to sell, right? Because you have such a valuable skill set. Now, examples of sales in everyday life, right? If you're trying to persuade someone to go on a date with you, that's sales, right? If you just want to go ahead and get some customers, that's sales. If you want to recruit people to work for you, that's sales, right? When you want to convince your parents to allow you to get a dog, that's sales, right? When you convince your friends or family members to go to your favorite restaurants, that's sales, right? When you want to sell people on an interesting idea, that's sales, right? When you want to sell your friends and family to go to a restaurant that you want to go to, that's sales, right? And it keeps going. Everything in life is sales. When you want to make more money, that's sales, right? When you have to sell yourself on why you should get out of bed to actually do the important things that you need to do and build your business, that is sales, right? When you convince your kids to brush their teeth, that is sales. So every aspect of life is sales, right? And sales is actually applied to every aspect of life. Now, when it comes to business, the reason sales is so important to a business is without sales, you actually are not making any money. And so what people do is people try to avoid sales because it has this negative stigma to it, right? But if you really look at it, sales is actually the lifeline of your business, right? You can run all the ads in the world and you can have a whole bunch of leads and you can do the best lives inside of your community if you're running the community process. But if you don't know how to sell, well, you're not making any money. You're not going to be able to capitalize on that, right? Because as an entrepreneur, once you set up your marketing, right? If you're going the community strategy, once you set up your community, once you get everything going, once you got leads coming in, well, that's the only other task that's left for you to do, which is to sell, right? That's the only thing that's going to push the needle forward inside of your business. There's nothing more that you can do inside of your business that is worth more your time, right? And many businesses never survive because they put so much effort into everything else. They put effort into marketing, branding, logo, getting apparel, this, that, right? But they fail to focus on the thing that drives the business forward, which is sales, right? Without sales, you have no cash flow. And without cash flow, you don't have a business, you have a liability, okay? So let's paint a picture for you, because if you can't get a picture in your head, we're going to paint that for you, right? So if you don't have sales, you don't make any money. Right? If you don't do sales, you have no consistency, right? Number 3, if you don't have sales, you have no resources, right? You have no cash, right? Because if you have no cash, then you can't pour it into your business. You can't pour it into yourself. You can't pay yourself profit, all right? Then, we got 2 number 3s, right? So we actually go into number 4. No sales equals no clients, right? No sales equals wasted time, right? What are you going to do with all that time on your hands, right? You're not going to just sit on your butt because now you're spending money on marketing. Well, now you have to actually make some money using sales, right? You don't have a business, right? Because one of the 5 core functions, as you know, sales is right in the middle. So if you do lead gen and lead nurture, but if you don't do sales, well, you have nothing to fulfill upon, right? There's no growth. There's no emotional stability because you don't have a steady stream of income, right? If you need more convincing on why sales is important, here you go. Sales is like a punchline to a joke, right? Without it, things just don't make sense. And people are left wondering why you started in the first place. Right? That's one reason. Sales in your business is like a fancy car with no gas. It's impressive, but it ain't going nowhere, right? Sales in your business is like a flashlight with no batteries. Sure, it has potential, right? But not much use if you're actually in the dark. So imagine putting all that time into certification and now in the business side of things and coming this far and giving up simply because you don't want to learn the single most important function inside of business, right? And like I was saying earlier, where you have your lead gen system, you have your lead nurture system, but if you don't have a sales system, well, nothing's moving forward, right? The system is actually important, all right, to be able to make money inside of your business. It's literally one of the most important functions in business. There's no company on earth that does not have a sales process or a sales mechanism in place, because without sales, you cannot move forward in business, right? And so don't take this lightly, because understanding sales and understanding the process of sales is going to serve you for the rest of your entrepreneurial journey. So with that being said, let's help you guys understand the different types of sales that actually exist, right? There's multitudes of different types of sales. We're going to fly through this. That way, you know the different categories of sales that exist. So the first category is B2B sales, and this is where you're selling business to business. These are the sales that occur between businesses, right? So for example, if you have an office of 40 people, right? You have a actual office somewhere and you go to Office Depot and they sold you paper for your office, that would be considered a B2B sale, right? Now, can a normal person go in and buy paper? Yes, but if you're buying paper for 40 people, right, that means you're actually going to be buying a whole bunch of paper, probably for a year or 2 years or 5 years in advance. So you're going to actually be placing big contracts, right? So these types of sales have long cycles, multiple decision makers, and they're worth hundreds and thousands of dollars. All right, now we go into B2C sales, okay? This is a sale that occurs between a business to consumer or a civilian, okay? This is the type of sale that you are going to be doing as a remote wellness practitioner. So Netflix, right, is a B2C seller. It sells subscriptions to individual customers, okay? And this is the majority of type of sales that you will see, either B2B or B2C, all right? Then we have enterprise sales. This is where you're selling large organizations, right? So if you were to sell your remote wellness practice to Apple headquarters, well, that would be an enterprise sale because that's an enterprise type organization. Then we have SaaS sales, and this is selling software as a service. Okay, so Canva is a great example. Canva, when Canva sells you their software, right, or HubSpot or Salesforce, that is a software as a service that you can actually get, and you actually pay for a monthly subscription. Right? Jotform that you guys utilize inside of your business, that is software as a service, right? And then you have direct sales, and this is a type of B2C sale, and this is where it actually involves product. And with direct sales, you can have a D2C, which is kind of like direct to consumer. So example, this would be someone who sells jewelry on Etsy, right? They're actually direct to consumer, so they make the jewelry and they sell it directly to the individual, right? That would be an example of direct sales. So there's multitudes and different types of sales that exist, but not only that, there's actually different ways to actually sell as well. So if you remember from the Money Machine training, sales is one of the core functions inside of a business. And there's different ways of selling. There's Zoom, there's webinar, there's sales pages, there's live events, there's in person. Right? Now, for our purposes, we're going to be using the phone, using TCK, and then we're going to be using Zoom. However, it's good for you to understand all the other ways that you can actually sell as well. Right? You can sell over the phone. You can sell over Zoom. You can sell over webinars, live events, sales pages, email sales. You can do social media sales, e-commerce platform, direct mail sales, face-to-face sales, affiliate sales, content marketing sales, SMS mobile sales, influencer marketing sales, online ads, live chat sales, podcast sales, and it could just keep going on and on and on. Now, don't get this twisted that you have to learn all 17 different types of ways plus more ways to sell. That's not the truth. Okay. What you have to do is you have to learn one skill at a time, which is probably going to be phone sales and then probably going to be doing sales over Zoom. Those are going to be the two tools and methods that you use to sell. Now, don't start going out there and putting together a live event, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that selling different types or doing different types of sales require different types of skills. And as you grow in your entrepreneurial journey, you will refine your skills, right? And there's no way that you can't learn later down the line to use webinars or use VSLs or use live events. Those are all different ways to sell, right? But first, you have to learn the fundamentals and the principle of selling because those apply to any type of sales that you are doing and any way of sale that you are doing. So regardless of whether you're doing B2B, B2C, direct sales, right? These same principles apply. And depending on what medium you're using to sell, right? Whether it's phone sales, Zoom, webinars, live events, sales pages, whatever it may be, the principles still apply regardless of any type of sales that you're doing, right? In the medium, you're just doing it a little bit differently. With phone sales, you're doing one-to-one. With Zoom, you might be doing one-to-many. With webinars, you're doing one-to-hundreds. Now, the next immediate thing that comes up usually for a lot of people when they're doing sales is limiting beliefs around sales. All right. And being in the sales world and having trained tons of people, whenever you actually mention sales to anybody, somebody is going to cringe, right? Somebody is going to have a hard, tough reaction to sales. And usually it's because nowadays people have a lot of sales resistance. And what that means is people are just afraid to being sold to and being taken advantage of. That's just a sad reality nowadays, right? Most people have this negative connotation and think that sales comes down to being a used car salesperson where you're going to swindle people for their money, right? Unfortunately, most people live a life on autopilot, right? They don't think for themselves. They just have somebody else tell them that sales are bad. And so now they have this belief ingrained inside of their head that sales is just outright bad, right? So is eating a Big Mac, but no one's having a big fuss about that. The reality is, people are against sales or they're not about sales is because they either say, I'm not a natural salesperson, right? These are some of the limiting beliefs that come up. I have a hard time asking for money. I don't want to sound salesy. I want people to come to me and be ready to pay. Like, just enter any limiting belief that you want to enter about sales here. It doesn't matter what it is, because at the end of the day, sales is a skill. Right? And just like any skill, you are going to suck at first. Usually the people that say, oh, sales sucks, I never want to be in sales, it's usually because in college, they got a sales job, they did it for 2 days, and it was really hard, and they weren't willing to put through and go through hard work, right? And they're now identified as sales being bad, right? Versus sales is actually one of the greatest skill sets that you can have. And as I said earlier, if you have the skill set of sales, you can go to any organization and make anywhere from $120,000 to $150,000 a year just by selling, right? Because that is how valuable this skill actually is. And just like any skill, right? You just got to get the knowledge and then just got to put the reps in. And most people are not willing to put the reps in, right? First of all, they don't even gain the knowledge, and then they're not willing to put the reps in, and then they wonder they're not good at sales, right? Now, for those people that are anti-sales, I kind of want to break things down for you. So post 2008, which is what we call the trust era, more and more people due to the internet have become more susceptible to sales resistance, right? And now we have the ability to pull reviews and just figure out like, hey, what is going on with this business? Do I trust this business? Like, most people read like 50 million reviews before they actually make a decision, right? Pre-2008, even further than that, like 20 to 30 years, right? We did not have pocket computers. Right? We couldn't search up reviews. We just had to take the salesperson's word for it, right? So the salespeople, unfortunately, had the power. And at that time, the organizations were very shady, right? They were just doing some stuff that was not cool, and they were gypping people out of money. And so now the entire society has been susceptible to sales as being bad, right? Now, post 2008, right? Now buyers and consumers have all the power. Right? So they get to choose who it is that they want to work with, right? Because there's so many options, right? And so now the focus is all around selling ethically, and we're focused on helping the prospect make the right decision for them. Now, when limiting beliefs exist, what people do is they spin up stories and myths, right? And these get passed down, and then it affects us as a society as a whole. And having limiting beliefs around sales doesn't serve anyone. Right? We know this. It doesn't serve anyone. It's not going to help anybody out. Right? And so moving along here, we're going to talk a little bit about the common myths about sales. And it's crazy because anytime humans have limiting beliefs, we're actually going to go ahead and project it on others because we are very fancy in sharing our opinions and our thoughts and our beliefs upon others. Right. And when that happens, when enough people buy into the myths and beliefs, the world just crumbles. Right. I'm just kidding. But it's actually true. Right. But at the end of the day, over the years, sales has some pretty crazy, unrealistic myths around the topic. And it's usually created by people, like I said, that are not very good at sales. Right. And if it hurts your feelings by saying that, hey, you got a sales job after college and then you quit after 2 days because you couldn't do it, well, I'm sorry that it hurts your feelings. But 99.9% of the time, people who start rumors about sales are just like that. Right. And I'm not saying that's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that these myths are not true. So some of the main myths that actually come up when we talk a little bit about sales is myth number one is a salesperson has to have high energy or has to be very pressuring for the prospect. Myth number two is all about people being born a salesperson, which is preposterous in my personal opinion, right? And number three, that men make better salespeople. So we're going to actually break each of these down one by one. So let's talk about having high energy and being a high pressured salesperson. So going back to what we were talking about, post 2008 era, buyer's resistance is at an all-time high. So if you show up on a coaching call or if you show up on a sales call and you're high energy, you're extroverted, and what that's going to do, it's going to come off as fake. Now, if you have high energy and you're extroverted, then that's totally okay because it's not coming off as fake. But if you're faking it as a salesperson, human beings have a very good, natural way of detecting the energy of the individual. It's more of like an energy thing rather than how the other person is showing up, right? Because the goal for us on our sales calls should be the fact that we are grounded, right? And we have the ability to go deep within the conversation. We're not trying to keep it surface level, all right? Because when you're high energy, extroverted, you're just trying to sell. That's not the goal. The goal is to have deep conversations with the prospect to help them solve their problem, right? Now, there's a place and a time for having high energy and bouncing off the walls, right? That's great for networking. But when it comes to sales, we want to have certainty. We want to have groundedness. We want to have confidence. That is what people are actually looking for, right? Because what people are looking for is they want to make sure that the person that they're going to pay to solve their problem knows what they're doing, right? And just being extroverted doesn't mean that you're good at sales. If you are extroverted, you're going to have to develop the skill of having deep conversations with people, serious conversations with people, being a leader for these people and really helping them understand how it is that you can actually help them. All right. Now, moving along, we're going to be talking about myth number two, which is salespeople are actually born. And this is the biggest myth, right? Like Coach Yasin and myself, we weren't born salespeople, right? Nor anybody on our team. We've had to work at it. It's a skill that we've gotten better at. And so how you get better at sales is by putting the reps in, having the right information, and having the right mentorship. Right? Once you do the reps and if you consume the right information, sales just becomes easier. And if you just put the reps in, then it becomes unreasonable for you not to be good at it. All right. Now, moving on to myth number three, that men make better salespeople than women, which is furthest from the truth, to be quite honest, right? Sales has nothing to do with gender. It has more to do with energy. And it's not about high or low energy. It's about masculine or feminine energy. And please don't get this twisted because we want to make sure that we can explain this concept, right? So every human being has a masculine or a feminine energy, right? Masculine energy is when you're grounded, you're focused, and you're really focused on a singular aspect, right? Which is useful for solving problems. Versus feminine energy is more empathetic, you feel others, you actually sympathize with others, and you can take in and do a lot of things all at once, right? To be a world-class salesperson, you need to be able to balance both energies where you can have that feminine energy and absorb that energy, but also be masculine and be grounded. Now, the cool thing is women are actually way better at balancing between their energies. So it's not a male or female thing. It's just having the skill set to be able to actually identify, hey, what energy do I need to show up for this individual to be able to have that deep inner conversation with the person? Now, a great resource for the dynamic, if you want to learn more about feminine and masculine energies, is John Wineland. There's some great stuff on YouTube that you can search up about this. He has a great book that you can look into as well. But this will also help you get better at sales because then you can adapt to what the prospect actually needs. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the sales explained section. If you have any questions about this section or anything that we discussed, make sure to go ahead and let us know inside of the student community. And with that, we will catch you guys in the next training section. All right, team, welcome back. And in this training section, we're going to be talking about sales principles. All right. Now you understand what sales is, the different types of sales, and one of the most important skills that you're going to actually develop. Now what we're actually going to do is jump into the sales philosophy. All right. And really learning how you can understand the principles from a 30,000 foot overview. So without further ado, let's jump right on in. So we understand that principles are very, very, very important because our whole goal is to really teach you how to think about sales, right? And when you learn how to think about sales, it gives you behavioral flexibility because what's going to happen in a sales call or in the sales process, you're dealing with humans, right? And when you're dealing with humans, humans are unpredictable. And so using principles like a syntax, you're going to be able to navigate situations better. So principles are like 30,000 foot overview. So this is what principles actually are. They're like the macro overview. And then we get into the trenches, right? Which is the quick chats, the strategy sessions, the sales process, the outbound calls. All of the tactics are what we get into at the trenches, but the macro is understanding the principles around what is it that people buy, what is it that we're actually doing. That way we can understand everything better, right? And we all know that tactics are useless without principles behind them, right? And principles are frameworks that actually allow our mind to think, because the whole goal with education is not the learning of facts, but training of the mind to think. And our society and our school system has actually failed to do that by forcing us to memorize things when really it's about not what to think, but how to think, right? And when you can learn how to think, that's what's going to empower you to be able to push the needle forward and get what it is that you want to get done. So with that being said, the first principle that we want to go over and talk a little bit about is, what do people actually buy? All right. And we really want to get a clear understanding of what is it that we're selling? What is it that people are buying? That way, when you are selling it, you have a better probability of making the sale. All right. So from a surface level, right, what we see is that people are actually buying a product or maybe a service, right? That's what people are actually buying. But beyond that, what are people actually buying on a deeper fundamental level? Right? Because most people think that people are buying their program. They're maybe buying you or your energy, maybe your company or your brand, or maybe from your testimonials. But that's not the case, because people buy the end result. At the end of the day, from a core fundamental level, people are buying the desired situation, right? Where they want to be. Now, when we say people are buying the desired situation, we're talking about the outcomes or the transformation that your product or your service actually delivers to the prospect. So essentially, we're talking about the outcomes or the transformation that the product or service promises or delivers, right? Or what it's going to actually deliver to the prospect. So it's not just about the product itself, but it's kind of the improvement, the solution, and like how the life of the prospect is improved because of your product and service. And so if you remember from the strategy session training, that is where we're selling futures, not features, because nobody cares about the features. They just care about the vacation, right? We're selling the vacation, not the plane flight, right? And when somebody buys the end result, that leads them either towards pleasure or away from pain, okay? People are either trying to go towards pleasure or away from pain. And when a prospect is motivated and they're pushing towards the end result, we refer to that as surface level results and emotional level results. And we'll talk about that in just a second, right? Because what they're doing is they're looking for the outcome. Right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, when somebody is running away from pain, or the end result is that they want to get away from pain, we refer to that as surface level pain and emotional level pain. All right. So let's actually break both of these down further. So the first thing that we're going to look into is going to be the surface level results versus emotional level results. All right. So in the surface, Everybody has surface level results. That's at the top, right? That's usually at the surface. And so if you look at like the earth has different layers to it, right? And human beings have different layers of motivation, right? And so if we have the surface level results up here, then we're going to have the emotional level results down here. So we have to start with the surface level and actually move into the emotional level. Now, the surface level results are stuff that we can see, we can touch, we can measure it, we can actually physically attribute it, right? So when you purchase a weight loss program and you lose 20 pounds, that is the surface level, right? Or if you buy a computer and it's faster, you're able to do more work on it, right? You have more storage space. That is the surface level results, right? These are all the things that you can notice and feel at the surface level. Now, emotional results, on the other hand, are feelings or emotional states that the product or service helps the customer achieve. Okay, so these go much deeper, and 99.9% of the time, these are the main drivers behind someone buying something or doing something. Okay, so if you use the weight loss example, right, the emotional results of losing those 20 pounds is the person feeling more confident, attractive, and more energetic. Or for the new computer that they're excited. Right now they have status, the excitement of owning the latest tech, right? And not having to deal with slow, outdated systems so they can get their work done faster, right? That's an emotional level result. Now, majority of the time, especially when you're selling to B2C or doing B2C sales, right, which is business to consumer, the emotional result is far more powerful because more people are trying to get away from pain because people make decisions based off of emotions and justify it by logic. So you could say that the surface level result is kind of the logical side of things versus the emotional level result is the emotional side of things, right? Because when somebody tells you, I just want to get healthy, right? That's surface level. But when you get into the emotional side of things, hey, I want to lose 40 pounds so I can be comfortable being intimate with my partner and looking myself in the mirror with confidence. Well, that's an emotional aspect of things, right? And while surface level results initially might attract a customer or a potential client towards you, it's the emotional level results that actually closes the sale. All right. And the emotions are going to play a big part, like I said, in the decision-making process. All right. And it's important to have both because we want to make sure that we can justify the surface level results and then the emotional level results as well. And so when you're talking about results, that's referring to people that are motivated by results. Now, there's some people that are motivated by pain, right? They're led by getting away from pain, and pain is a very big motivator. So let's talk a little bit about surface level pain. So the surface level pain is the visible, tangible problem or difficulties that the person is actually facing, right? And these issues can actually be very easily identified and actually be seen. So for instance, if somebody breaks their ankle, that's a surface level pain. Ouch, like that's gonna hurt, okay? And then when we actually go into emotional level pain, we dive a little bit deeper. To use this example, right, we're gonna be tapping into the feelings and the emotional discomfort that arise from the problem or the pain, all right? So this person that broke their ankle, now they can't pursue their dream of college basketball, and now they're defeated, they're crushed, and they're extremely depressed and sad. So surface level pain helps you understand what the prospect needs on a practical level versus the emotional level pain actually helps you understand the urgency and the importance of the need, okay? So at the fundamental level, all human beings are trying to escape pain and seek pleasure, right? We just can't help it. That is how our brains are wired. In nature, we're not meant to endure long bouts of pain. And we want to find a solution for that right away. And that's why in the strategy session process, you're going to learn two types of syntaxes that we have: problem first syntax and goals first syntax. So guess what? People that are trying to get away from pain, which is 99.9% of the time the case for B2C people, we're going to be going into surface level pain and emotional level pain versus people when we go into the goals first syntax, we're going to be talking about surface level results, right? And then emotional level results. See how we did there? Versus the problem is all associated with pain versus the goal is all associated with results. And we'll talk more about this when we go deep into the syntaxes, but we just want you guys to know that the problem first syntax helps those folks whose end result is to get away from pain versus the goals first syntax is to help people who are actually going towards pleasure. Now, as we get deeper into this rabbit hole, we're going to go really in depth and we're going to talk about how to get people to buy anything. Okay. How do you get somebody to buy anything that you are selling? Because at the end of the day, it's not about what you say or what it is that you do. It's about how do you get the person in the state to actually want to invest time, energy, and money into what it is that you are selling or what is the solution that you are providing. Now, this doesn't only apply to health coaching or selling your program. It applies to selling anything. You're selling washer and dryers, this will work. You're selling refrigerators, it'll work. You're selling water bottles, it'll work. It will work if you are absolutely selling anything, because it just comes down to the 4 steps to sell anyone anything, okay? And so how do you get somebody to buy? Step 1, you get them into the right emotional state, okay? Step 2, you build pressure. Number 3, you widen the gap. All right. And number 4, you become the best path to their heaven. So with that being said, let's actually talk a little bit about this, which is step 1. Now we're going to actually uncover the emotional state. So we're going to put them into the emotional state to actually buy. Okay. So now at a fundamental level, you understand that people buy the end result, right? And so the first step is we need to understand how to get people to buy. And again, we buy based off of emotions and then we justify it by logic. So before we buy anything, we need to get the individual first in the right emotional state to buy. So what does that actually mean? Okay. When we feel pain in a specific moment, we have certain emotions that we actually feel in that moment. So for example, if you're going to work, right, and you drop warm coffee on yourself on your way to work, right? What are you going to feel? You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel angry. You're going to be sad because you lost a whole bunch of your coffee. And let's say we're trying to sell this person a coffee mug, right? And we're trying to sell them a coffee mug that doesn't spill. Well, you can sell it to them anytime, right? But we want to make sure that we can sell it to them when they're in the best state of mind to actually buy. And when is the best state of mind that they're going to buy the mug? That's usually going to happen when they spill their coffee, right? Because now they're in the most pain. But many people, even us, we don't have the luxury to actually do that, to be at the right place at the right time to sell something. So to increase our chances of closing a sale, right, what we do is we draw out the same emotions that they felt when they actually spilled the coffee. And we do that by asking skilled questions, right? We're going to ask questions and we're going to have them explain to us how they felt. Right? And that brings up those emotions that they felt during that time. And what it does, it allows us to tap into the same energy and frustration that they felt to get them to purchase the unspillable mug. And so that is what actually allows us to get people in the right state of buying, the right emotional state of buying, because we actually uncover the emotional state. Okay. So once we're done with step 1, where we go ahead and uncover the emotional state, right? The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to build some pressure. Okay. What does that mean? What does actually building some pressure mean? So we want to actually build some healthy tension during the sales call. Okay. Now we want to create some healthy pressure or tension during the sales call. Now it doesn't have to be during the sales call in and of itself. It can be during the sales process. It could be during any way or form of sales that you are doing. But for us, our primary example is going to be through selling over the phone and using Zoom. So we're going to be calling it a sales call. All right. Now let's talk about the 2 types of pressure that exist. There's internal pressure and then there's external pressure. Okay. So what is internal pressure? Internal pressure is where we help the prospect get motivated from the inside out. So they've got a fire lit underneath them and they are motivated themselves to do the work that they need to do to get away from the pain or get the result that they want. Okay. That's internal pressure. Now, external pressure is where the prospect has to be pressured to do something for external reasons. Okay. This might be a promotion, right? So Black Friday is a massive promotion where everybody's like, hey, prices are low, so now I'm going to buy. And that's external pressure, even if you didn't want to buy anything, right? Now, a lot of people are going to take this and think that external pressure is actually bad when it's actually not, right? You can apply a little bit of healthy external pressure, right? If you wanted to, but the key is the balance. So we want to actually stay 75% of the time, right? 75% of the time we want to be internal, and 25% of the time we need to be external. So we want it to lean more towards internal because the person has to be motivated to actually solve their own problem, right? So majority of the time we find it easier to actually create internal pressure if the person actually wants to reach their goals bad enough. If the person wants it bad enough, then it's very easy for us to create that internal pressure because they're the ones that actually want it. And then with a little bit of external pressure, sometimes you don't even need external pressure to push them across the finish line and actually buy your program. Now, let's actually talk about how to build internal pressure. What does that actually look like? And so to build internal pressure, it actually goes back to current situation and desired situation. And you're going to see this theme being led throughout the entire sales process. And so the way that the internal pressure is actually created is where you define the current situation and the desired situation of where the prospect is at. Okay? Where they at currently, right? And where are they trying to go? So this is their hell, right? And this is their heaven. Right? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to paint a clear picture between where they're at and where they're trying to go. So where's their hell and where is their heaven? Because majority of people, and this is approaching it from the aspect of surface level pain and emotional level pain. All right. So when they're moving away from pain towards pleasure, that is what this process actually looks like. All right. And when we define that hell and heaven, we're going to be able to see, okay, this is where the person's at, this is where they need to go, and they're going to be able to verbalize that to us. And because they're going to be describing their current situation, that's going to create that internal pressure for them to want to get out of that. Okay. And then once we actually clearly define that, then what we're going to do is we're going to create a wide gap between the two. Like, hey, you're here, right? And it sucks where you're at. Well, we got to get you to here. We got to get you to paradise. Well, what does that look like? And like I said, we want to avoid pain. And so when we stretch out the distance between current situation and desired situation, it's stressful. It creates anxiety, right? And that's a form of pain for the brain, right? It rhymed there. But that's a form of pain for the brain. And what we want to do is we want to actually find the most immediate solution to actually resolve it, right? Because emotionally, we need to find the most immediate solution. And then as long as the solution makes sense logically, we're going to make the decision to actually move forward. And the cool thing is, because you've been facilitating the conversation the entire time, you can come in there and present your solution as the best solution for them to get from their current situation to their desired situation. That way, you become the savior for the individual because now they were in pain and now, boom, you became that solution. All right. Now going into number 3. So we talked a little bit about step 1, which is uncovering the emotional state. Step 2, which is building the pressure. And step 3 is going to be all about widening the gap. So now what we're doing with widening the gap, right, is we're widening the gap between where they're at and where they want to be. Right. And the wider the gap, the more tension that it actually creates, because now the prospect is, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm trying to be, and this is difficult. I don't want to be in this uncomfortable situation. Now, you might be asking like, hey, Coach Malik, I get the concept, right? You have to create tension and you have to widen the gap, but how do you actually do that, right? The way you actually widen the gap is by really clarifying specific numbers and specific details about where the individual is currently at right now. Okay, so let's talk about specific numbers. When it comes to specific numbers, what we're really trying to do, and if we use the weight loss as an example, what we're really trying to do is get specific numbers around their weight, their body fat, their inches, their pant size, and anything quantifiable, right? Hey, how much do you weigh? Where do you carry the most fat? So let's say if somebody is 250 pounds, right, and they're trying to get to 150, it's going to be crucial to ask them both, like, hey, where are you currently at and what is your goal? Because what asking about the pain does, it actually brings up all the emotional baggage that the numbers have set to them. Because whenever they actually admit to themselves that they're 250 right now, there's a certain emotion that they actually feel with that number, right? And we want to bring that emotion to the surface because we want to be able to use that to help them make the right decision for them, right? And when somebody tells you like, hey, I weigh 250 pounds and I want to weigh 150, there's a little bit of embarrassment, there's a little bit of emotion, there's a little bit of fear there, right? And then they actually start to realize the severity of their goals. Because on a day-to-day, think about it, most of us never think about our long-term goals. We never think about our current situation, right? We're sleepwalking through life half of the time, right? But when we actually think, it's usually when we're passing by the mirror, right? Or we're taking a shower, or we're walking next to glass and we see a reflection of how we look, right? That is when we realize these moments, and that is when the emotions come up. And to protect us, the brain shuts down those emotions because we have to be emotionally stable to do the task at hand. So it's very important for us to bring up those specific numbers. And then the second way that we widen the gap is through specific details. And there's going to be times where sometimes we can't get specific numbers. Let's say somebody doesn't even know how much they weigh because they're so embarrassed to get on the scale, right? So what we do is we switch over to specific details. And the way we do that is we do it through active listening. Active listening is where we're creating this mental image of their situation in our head. And the way we do that is by channeling our feminine energy that we talked about earlier and really having the empathy to put ourselves in the prospect's shoes and having that sympathy and asking questions and getting clear on what their situation is. And then that's the second portion of specific details, is getting situational clarity, right? And really getting a very good understanding of, hey, what is making you make this decision right now? What made you decide to make a change once and for all? How does that feel? Being where you're at right now, what is the emotion that it drives? What was the worst part about that? What happened? Walk me through that, right? All humans are memory creatures, right? We make assumptions about the future based on our past experiences. So when we bring that part back up, it allows them to get into the state where they feel the pain. And again, we want to avoid pain, which motivates us to make a decision. So all of this, guys, all of this really comes down to isolating the pain and bringing the pain to the surface. So in essence, you can say, really, step one is the most important one, which is, hey, if you get the person to be in the right emotional state, then you build the pressure around that emotional state, and then you widen the gap. Well, you're placing yourself in a very good spot to be able to close the sale. All right. Now we move on to step number 4, which is where you become the best path to their heaven. So what have you done so far? So up until this point, you uncovered the emotional state, right? They spilled the coffee, you asked questions, you brought that emotional state back up. Then you built that internal pressure by asking more questions. How does that feel? Right? Where are you at? What was the challenge with that? Emotionally, how did you feel? And then we widen the gap a little bit more by getting specific numbers and specific details about what is going on. So what we're doing is having the prospect really paint a picture of the pain that they are in, right? Or the result that they're trying to get. So it's kind of like daydreaming in essence, right? And so what they're doing is we're really painting this picture for us. And then once we have a very clear idea of their pain, we know the emotional state that they're in. Well, the last thing left to do is to just jump in there and become the superhero of the day and become the best path to their heaven, right? And just because the prospect wants to take action doesn't mean they're going to take action with you. So what a lot of people will do is they'll do all 3 steps, but they won't present their option or their path as the best path to heaven, right? So guess what? You lose the sale, right? Because the biggest fail is, let's say you teed up the sale and then they go buy from somebody else. That's a big fail. Right? So what we have to do is we have to tie the bow, right? We have to bow tie all of this and really like make sure that the present is ready to go, is that, hey, we've got the current situation, right? We defined it, the desired situation. We created the gap. We killed off every other option that actually existed, right? So they're not going to make any other choice. And our path becomes the path that gets them to their heaven. Okay. And so while we're doing all of this, the way this is going to happen is, how do we actually get somebody from point A to point B is really just understanding, number 1, how can we actually help the prospect? And then number 2, eliminating objections before the close. That is the goal when we actually go into a sales call. Right? And eliminating objections is really destroying all other possibilities of them considering any other option. Okay. And so this right here is summarizing the entire sales process and what that actually looks like, right? We'll define the current situation and then the desired situation. We'll create the gap between the two. We'll kill off every other option that exists, right? That's why it's a U-turn. You got to go back to your current situation, because if you try all of these things, it's not going to get you to where it is that you want to go. We create that internal pressure by identifying the current situation, and then boom, we actually present our program as the best solution for them to get to where it is that they want to go. Now, guys, this doesn't have to be just for our sales, right? This can apply to any type of sale that you're actually doing. Okay, so now let's actually bring it all together, because we want to make sure that we can actually see this cohesively. So we know that there are 4 steps needed for someone to making a buying decision, right? The 4 steps are: step number 1, uncovering the emotional state. Step number 2 is building that pressure. Step number 3 is widening the gap. And step number 3, becoming the best path to their heaven. And this is what the sales process is going to look like. Primarily, this is how your call is actually going to go. Okay. So as you're conducting your strategy sessions, keep this in the back of your mind, because this is going to be happening as you're doing the call, right? It's going to be happening the entire time, right? Sometimes it can also happen during the lead nurture process. No matter what way that you are selling, right? You're always going to be helping somebody realize their current situation, their desired situation, creating that internal pressure, and then really widening the gap between where they're at and where they're trying to go, and then becoming the solution. Now, the cool thing is, like I said, this doesn't apply to just selling products and services. It could be used to sell anything, because what this does, it actually helps us change the prospect state, right, at an internal level, which allows us to help them make the right decision for them. Okay. So now you're probably wondering, man, my brain is on fire right now. How do I actually put this into application? Like, how do I actually remember all of this to apply this to my strategy session? So here's the truth. What I want you to remember is you don't have to remember everything, right? You just want to understand the overall concept and the frameworks that actually go into executing everything, okay? Because when it comes to sales, we get so caught up with the script, right? We get so caught up with what questions to ask and how to tackle the objections like a ninja, right? All that stuff is great, but that's not what's going to come in handy in the long run, because that's stuff that you're going to learn on the job. This is the stuff that you need to know as a big picture, right? No matter whether you're selling air conditioners, whether you're selling plumbing, health coaching, cars, all of these principles apply. Okay. So if you can follow these steps, right, which is step 1, uncovering the emotional state. Step 2, building the pressure. Step 3, widening the gap. Step 4, becoming the best path to their heaven, right? And your product solves the problem that the person is trying to solve. There should be no reason why they should not buy from you. All right. And so we want to make sure that we can create the space and the environment to have a perfect sales process and a perfect sales call. And this is what allows us to actually create the perfect sales environment, or what we call the buying condition. All right, team. So once you understand this, there should be no reason why you can't sell anyone anything, as long as you take these 4 steps. You get the person in the right buying state, right? The right emotional state. You build the pressure, you widen the gap, you become the best solution. Well, they have no other options but to invest into you and your program and your service. So with that being said, team, that wraps up our training section on sales principles. If you have any questions about this section or anything that we discussed, make sure to go ahead and ask us inside of the student community. And with that, we're going to log out here, and we'll catch you guys in the next training section. All right, team. Welcome back. And in this section, we're going to be talking about the perfect sales process. And so if you're ready to be blown out of this water talking about sales process, well, you came to the right training. And so what we're going to be talking about in this section is going to be the sales process, the 6 parts of the strategy session process, and all the nuances that you need to understand to completely dominate sales and really just dominate all of your strategy sessions. All right. So let's dive right on in. So at this point, you should understand the overarching principle of sales. All right. And as long as you have this visual framework in your mind and you're doing sales, really at the end of the day, it matters more about how you structure the sale than it actually comes down to like what you say, the nitty gritty and the tactics side of things, right? Because if you're applying the principles, then you're going to be successful. Now, understanding the sales process is going to do the exact same thing for you. So this was a sales principle that you guys understood. Now, inside of the sales principle, we're actually going to go inside of the sales process and talk a little bit about that. So we are going to give you a 30,000-foot overview into the sales process. And once you understand the process and the flow of the sales process, that's going to give you the ability to think and apply things on your own rather than being a remote control student and seeing, okay, what can I do to optimize this process? What can I do to actually make it better? Now, one thing that we really want to help you guys understand is, why do we call it the perfect sales process? So this story actually goes back, right, where we watch the movie Ford versus Ferrari, and their goal for the Ford GT, right, was to build a perfect machine. And they wanted that perfect machine to accomplish the perfect run at 24 hours Le Mans, right? And so we brought that concept back into sales, where we said, okay, the perfect run, right, in this case is the lap, right? Or the perfect run is, in our case, is going to be the strategy session. And the perfect machine is going to be you, the salesperson, right? So if we can have the perfect run conducted by the perfect machine, then there should be no reason why that you can't have an unstoppable sales process, right? And then it really came down to optimizing the salesperson, which is the perfect machine, and then optimizing the sales process, which is the perfect run or the strategy session. And if you can do that on a consistent basis, then there should be no reason why you can't absolutely crush it at sales. So that's why this training section is called the perfect sales process. And then the next training section is going to be called the perfect sales machine. So moving along here, the first thing that we have to do is we have to define what is a sales process, right? We got to make sure that we actually go ahead and define terms, okay? Because the sales process doesn't just refer to sales, right? And it's not just about selling or getting customers. The sales process is actually all of the series of strategic steps, okay? It's all of the series of strategic steps that a salesperson follows to convert a prospect into a customer. So technically, lead gen and lead nurture and sales, all of these three core functions are part of the sales process. Now, we do say that lead gen is its own system and lead nurture is its own system and sales is its own system. Yes, and they work as a flow. But, right, based on the definition, it is all of these stages that the salesperson goes through to convert a prospect into a customer. Well, the lead gen, we are generating leads. Lead nurture, we're warming up those leads to get on a call with us. And then sales, we're selling those leads, right? And so even though lead gen and lead nurture are separate functions, they're still part and a very crucial part of the sales process. Now, to help you visually see this, right, the strategy session is a key component of the sales process, all right? So if this is the sales process for the community strategy, well, the strategy session is a key element within the sales process, right? And then if we look at the VSL strategy, right, the strategy session is a very key component of the sales process. So you can see the strategy session is just one element of the sales process, but it is the most crucial element, because without the strategy session, well, you're not going to be able to get any clients. You don't have a business, you don't have stability, you don't really have anything. You don't have a business if you're not really doing sales and conducting strategy sessions well. Okay, so now that you understand what the sales process is, let's actually talk about the community versus VSL strategy and what the sales process actually looks like for both of those two. Now, these are going to be the strategies that you're going to learn along the way. There's multiple that you're going to learn, but the VSL and the community is going to be the most prominent one. It's probably going to be the ones that you're going to be using for a very long time, right? Because step one, we have to get the community strategy dialed in, because we have to validate our offer, make sure your price points are dialed in, make sure that you're actually doing your live coaching calls and live training calls on a weekly basis to really develop your voice, really get your spice messaging down. Then once you have your offer validated, once you have everything really dialed in, your price point dialed in, you're working with customers, you're getting clients consistently, then you can move on to the VSL strategy, which is a little bit more of a challenge, but it is built upon the foundation of the community strategy. All right. Now, how do these sales processes actually differ for both of these? So you can see here, the sales process for the community strategy starts out with people joining the community. Then they actually get nurtured inside of the community, right? Inside of your Facebook group, right? That's where we're going to consume the content and you're going to message them. And then they move over to the quick chat and then they move over to the strategy session. Okay. Versus when you're running the VSL, right? It's a direct from seeing the ad, they go to the landing page, they watch a value video, and then they schedule an appointment to get on a strategy session with you. So both of these are different sales processes, right? There's different strategies. And so we're using different sales processes for each, okay? So every strategy that you run is going to have a different sales processes that actually go along with that. And it's very important to understand that as you grow and as you change your strategy, you are going to have to adapt your sales process to the strategy that you were actually running, all right? So now we understand that. Let's actually dive into the perfect run and really help you guys understand what the perfect run actually is, okay? And earlier, we defined the perfect run as the strategy session, okay? And again, we want to make sure that we can go ahead and actually define terms. So in the community process, right, in the community sales process, we're going to have a quick chat and then we're going to have a strategy session versus the VSL, we go directly to the strategy session. So what's the nuance behind that? So the quick chat is actually a 15 to 30 minute phone call that we have that's scheduled with the prospect at a predetermined time. And the whole goal is to determine whether they are a good fit to work with you or not. So people are going to join your community, you're going to message them inside of the community, and then you're going to schedule quick chats, and then you're going to schedule a strategy session after you do a quick chat. Now, a strategy session, on the other hand, is a 45 to 60 minute call where you try to understand the prospect's current situation, then you understand their desired situation, and you determine whether your product or service is a good fit for them or not, okay? And if it is a good fit, then you're going to go ahead and actually sell them at the end of the call, and you're going to invite them to actually work with you, okay? Now, the perfect run is when we actually nail the strategy session, meaning we hit all phases of the strategy session. And there are two phases to the strategy session. Phase number one is selling, right? And this is primarily the strategy session script. And then phase number two is called closing. And this is where we have the enrollment and objection overcoming. So you can see here, this entire thing is the strategy session process. And then we have the phase one, which is selling. And then we have the phase two, which is closing. All right. So let's talk a little bit about phase one really quickly. Okay. So in this part, which is phase one, right, all we are doing is we are trying to identify the prospect's problems and demonstrate that our product and service can solve those problems. And during phase one, which is selling, we're going to have 6 parts to it. Okay. It's going to be intro and pre-frame. We're going to have discovery. We're going to have transition and coaching. We're going to have pitch. We're going to have commitment, and we're going to have price. Those are all of these 6 parts of phase one. Okay. Now, as soon as you drop the price, then we go from phase one to phase two, which is closing. Okay. And closing is the second phase of the strategy session script. And this is going to be the final part of the sales process. And closing is where you're actually sealing the deal, right? You're getting the commitment from the prospect to actually make a purchase from you. They pay you, or you're handling objections, which is really just alleviating any of their concerns that they have. So don't worry about the specifics. We're going to dive into that in upcoming training so that way you can understand. Right now, we just want you to have an overarching picture of what the process is actually going to look like so you can understand it way better. Now, another important element of the sales process is really going to be to understand the frames that we hold during the sales process, all right? And this might be a little bit of an abstract concept, but really what this is going to do is this is going to give you clarity on how to approach the sales process, okay? How to actually show up on your sales calls, and what is the frame that you're actually taking when you're actually messaging people, when you're actually getting on calls with people, when you're actually showing up inside of the community, right? Because the entire sales process is the process from which you take the prospect all the way to making them a customer. So we know that lead gen and lead nurture is also within the sales process technically. And so these frames are going to come in handy for us to actually apply to the content that we produce, the things that we share inside of the community, and what it's going to allow us to do. And it's going to allow us to actually hold a frame that the prospect actually views us from. And we're going to break those down. And we know, right, just a clarification, that frames is really just a point of view in which way that you actually see the world, right? Because somebody can actually look at wealth and think that it's good versus somebody can actually look at wealth and think that it's bad, right? It's the same thing. The thing by itself, the reality of wealth has not changed, but it's the perception of the human in which they view wealth has changed. And so frames will really allow us to simplify what reality is and the reality that we're trying to create for the prospect and the way that we want the prospect to actually view us during the sales process, okay? And so there's 3 frames that we want to approach our sales process from, okay? Number 1, it's the moral authority frame. Number 2, it's the outcome frame. And number 3, it's the expert frame, okay? And what this will allow us to do is if the prospect views us from these 3 frames, okay, this is what's going to allow us to actually coach them, pour into them, and help them change their frames and change their beliefs that they have around accomplishing their goals. Because without these frames, we cannot persuade, we cannot help, we cannot pour into the prospect whatsoever. So with that being said, let's actually jump into the first frame, which is the moral authority frame. All right. So when we're holding the moral authority frame over the prospect, now when we hold a frame over the prospect, what we mean is that the prospect actually sees us through this frame. And when the prospect actually sees us through the moral authority frame, right, they believe that we have their best interest at heart. Okay, they believe that we have their best interest at heart. And what this frame does, it establishes and lets the prospect know, right, that we have their best interest. We're trying to help them. And what you're really trying to show them is, hey, we're not trying to sell you a product or service. We're trying to provide you a solution to your problem. And what it is you have a sense of responsibility to guide them towards the right direction, which gives you the moral authority in the conversation. Because you have their goodwill in mind, right? They're going to trust you with you being able to navigate the conversation. They're going to give you the permission to navigate the conversation, right? Now, why is this so important? Because this allows you to show up as a leader on the call. Because if this is a stranger and they don't know you, well, how do they know that you are a leader, right? How do they know that they can trust you so you can actually lead them? The way that happens, it happens through the moral authority frame, all right? And so the example of people in society that hold these frames are doctors, police officers, our parents, right? So if your mom actually tells you to do something, you're going to do it without hesitation. Why? Because you instinctively know that this person is there to take care of us. They're not here to mean us any harm, right? So what we want to do is we want to plant the seed for these frames so you know how to approach the sales process from. That way, when you get into it, you're already primed and ready to go. And we'll go deeper into this in future trainings as well. All right. Moving on to frame number 2, which is the outcome frame. Okay. And the outcome frame is really simple. Our goal is that we want to detach ourselves from the outcome of the call. Okay. Most salespeople will get so caught up with wanting to close the sale that that's all they're actually focused on, right? And so what you want to do is you want to get away from focusing on closing the sale, right? And in order to really hold on to the outcome frame, these are the beliefs that you need to have, okay? The belief that you need to have is that you're the best in the world at what you do, right? The prospect needs you more than you need them, okay? And then number 3, the prospect should feel lucky if you decide to work with them, right? It's a selective process. You don't work with anybody. And you can actually say these things to be true because you don't work with anybody. Because if somebody's not a good fit, you're not going to take them on as a client, right? And if they say no, it's their loss. They're not going to get the solution that they need. right? So now you're detached from the outcome. You don't care whether the person buys or not. You're just there to help the individual. You're just there to help the person make the right decision for them, okay? And so when you detach yourself from the outcome, what you do is then you put emphasis on the process, right? And what you do is you focus on the transformation that the prospect wants, right? You identify the problems that they are facing. You get clarity on whether the prospect is willing to make a change or not, okay? And by focusing on the process in and of itself, right, that's what's going to allow you to help the process make a commitment to their goals, right? Because it's the process that actually counts. Because if you're just focused on closing the sale, then what you're going to do is you're going to fast forward to that, because if that's on your mind, right, if that's in your RAS, if your RAS is primed to close the sale, well, guess what you're going to do is you're just going to trudge forward and want to close the sale versus actually being in the moment, listening to the prospect, getting to know them, and really understanding where they are coming from so you can truly actually solve their problem. So now that we've actually covered that, let's move on to frame number 3, which is the expert frame. Okay. And it's very similar to the moral authority frame, but this actually refers to you being the expert in the context that's actually being discussed, right? And so the context that's actually going to be discussed is health coaching, right? Because you're the health coach, you know about health coaching, right? And the expert frame is actually very contextual to the specific knowledge that you have, right? Because context actually determines authority. So if a plumber tells you about how to live a healthier lifestyle, that's completely out of context because they're a plumber, right? Like they have a certain label and a certain profession. Now, can they? They absolutely can, right? Now, the expert frame is the one of a doctor, right? Where they're diagnosing the problem and recommending the situation. That is the frame that you want to approach when you're actually doing your sales calls, right? Entire sales process, even inside of the community, right? You're showing up as the expert, as the doctor, as the person who knows, and you're going to recommend the best solution for the individual, right? And this really helps when you actually get on with prospects that think they're too smart and they're trying to hold their own frame. So when you get those people, what you could do is actually just go, hey, I'm here to diagnose the problem that you're actually facing. Because if you already knew how to solve the problem, you would have already done it by now, right? So the frame that you're approaching this from is that you are the expert. You have all the knowledge around the context of whatever it is that you have context on. And in this case, it's going to be health coaching for the client. And they're coming to you. The doctor doesn't come to you. The person comes to the doctor, right? And so this person scheduled a strategy session. They're coming to you. You are the expert. They're there to seek your knowledge and your guidance. All right. So now let's actually understand, why are these frames so dang important? Okay. And the reason why these frames are important, because it helps us set the stage for a successful, focused, and effective sales process. Okay. When we set the stage like this, we're ensuring that the person is going to trust us. We're going to be able to persuade them. We're going to be able to really persuade them into their best interest so they make the best decision for them. All right. Each frame actually serves its own purpose. So the moral authority frame allows you to build trust and credibility with the prospect, right? And that's a huge element of the sales process. And when you demonstrate that you have their best interest at heart and you show that you have the expertise with the expert frame, the prospect is more likely to trust you. Okay. Then we go into the outcome frame, and that allows you to have direction and focus, right? Because when you're not focused and you're focused on being money hungry, then you're not really going to close the sale, right? And it makes sure that both you and the prospect are working towards the same goals. You're trying to help them, they're trying to help themselves, right? The byproduct is that you get paid for helping them. So where does all of this lead to? And so using the frames properly, what that's going to allow you to do is that's going to allow you to actually persuade and influence the prospect, right? You're going to allow them and help them. And when we persuade and influence the prospect, this allows us to help them make the right decision for them, because they see us as a trusted advisor. They see us as somebody who's on their side. They see us as somebody who's going to help them. So when we make our pitch, right, it's going to be more receptive and more accepted, and it's going to help us make the sale, right? Number 2, it's going to help us when we're overcoming objections, because if the prospect sees you as the expert, right, and somebody who genuinely wants to help them and not just make a sale, they're going to listen to your responses to their objections and reconsider their position. They're going to think things over because you're able to actually coach them. then last but not least, it allows you to actually build a long-term relationship, right? Because focusing on the prospect's needs and their desires, you're not just trying to make a quick sale, you're there to build a relationship. And this is what leads to the prospect wanting to work with you over and over and over again. So if we were to just recap this, we know that there are 3 frames that we're approaching all of this from, right? We have the moral authority frame, we have the outcome frame, and we have the expert frame. Having the right frame is going to allow us to coach the prospect and actually pour into them and change their frames and really change their beliefs around accomplishing their goals. Now, why are these so important? Because number one, it allows us to persuade and influence. It allows us to overcome objections, and it allows us to build long-term relationships with our prospects. Now, next up, you might be wondering, how do you actually apply all of this? This is a lot of knowledge, right? My brain is on fire, right? Now, you're not going to be good at this when you start. At the beginning, it's going to be all a challenge to remember all of this. Again, these are principles, right? These are 30,000-foot overviews and things that you just need to understand. But the only way that you're going to get better at something is simply by doing it. Our goal is to help you pay down the knowledge tax, or what we call the ignorance tax, all right? The time tax or the action tax is what we cannot pay for you. We've already gotten on the phone and done hundreds and thousands of calls up until this point to get better at sales, right? Now it's time for you to take the action tax, and we cannot do the work for you. So many people actually study sales, they read books, they do courses, but they actually never sell. So guess what? They never learn anything, right? Because sales is the type of skill that's not very conceptual. It has to be applied, right? And the best way for you to learn this as you're going through this is to learn the frameworks, right? Start taking sales calls, come back and go through these principles over and over and over again, right? It's kind of like sharpening your sword. You have to sharpen your blade to make sure before you can go to battle. And so this is you sharpening your sales skills, sharpening your sales sword, right? So you can understand better. And every time you come back after you do sales, you're going to be able to internalize a lot of these principles more and more because you're actually in the trenches and now you understand where these things actually apply. So the first time around, our goal is just to create awareness, right? You just want to know that these frames exist. You just want to know that these principles exist. You just want to know that there is a sales process. Then when you come back to it, that is where you're going to be able to put things into application. And when you put things into application, things are going to make more sense. And when things make more sense, you're going to be proud because then you can fine tune the entire process and really just be a savant and be an absolute savage at sales and literally close anybody that comes across the table from you because you have this undeniable skill set that nobody can take away from you. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the perfect sales process training section. If you have any questions about this section or anything that we discussed, make sure to go ahead and ask us inside of the student community. And with that, we are going to log out of here and we'll catch you guys in the next training section. All right, team, welcome back. And I'm so excited to have you all here and tuning in with me because this is going to be an incredible training section. And this is where we're going to be talking about the perfect sales machine. All right. And the perfect sales machine is going to be you, right? Which is going to be really awesome. And so really, once you understand the entire sales process and the principles and how to put everything into play, now it's all about regulating your energy, how you show up on a call, what you're putting in your mindset. Because at the end of the day, as a salesperson, you are transferring conviction. You are showing up and letting people know and coaching them on how to become the best version of themselves. All right. And so this is going to be the 20% work that nobody wants to do that actually drives 80% of the results. So imagine if all you had to do was 20% of the work that drives 80% of the results, wouldn't you do it? You absolutely would. But the problem is these are non-tangible things, right? People are like, I don't see an immediate return with this. But because they're non-tangible does not mean they're not important. You can actually apply these right away, and not only are you going to get better at sales, but you're actually going to level up as an entrepreneur, right? And this is not the sexy stuff. right? This is the stuff that people actually overlook, but this is going to be your competitive advantage if you apply this correctly. So why is this so important, right? Everybody talks about this. They're like, hey, why do we actually talk about energy management and why are we going into all of this? Now, in the sales world, many sales professionals are going to fall into something called a sales rut or a sales funk, right? So what is a sales rut? A sales rut, and it happens to all human beings doing anything of a repetition, right? Because a sales process is a repetitive process that you're doing over and over and over again. Now, a sales rut is when a salesperson is performing below 80 to 90% of their capacity. Now, don't get me wrong, as human beings, we're going to have days, right? We know that 30% of the week is going to suck. And so you're not going to show up 100% every single day. But we want to be on top of our game 85 to 90% of the time. And just like any problem, we first need to diagnose whether you're in a rut or not. Because the common thing that actually happens is that people actually think they're in a rut, but they're just having an off day. And then there's some people who are actually in a rut. They think that they're having an off day. See the confusion here? So some people might think they're in a rut, but it's just one of those days and then they come back to normal. But some people are actually in a rut and they just keep saying that, hey, it's an off day and I'm going to just come back, right? So we actually need to diagnose this, whether you're actually in a rut or not. And so there's an exact science of how to diagnose this. Now, this brings us back to why the game of entrepreneurship and business, it's all scientific, right? It's all numbers. And so what you have to do is you just got to sit down, schedule some thinking time, and analyze those numbers. Now, in performance settings, humans experience something called regression to the mean, right? We always return back to the averages. And with that happening, we can expect a dip in performance no matter who the person actually is. Now, there's two different types of dip in performance. So a dip in performance, if it's micro, let's say if it's only a couple days or maybe a week, right? Like 7 days or 3 or 4 days, that's completely normal. That's just part of the process. You haven't slept well. You're having some issues at home or family or stuff like that. That's normal, right? Now, a dip in performance in macro, let's say if it's biweekly or monthly, then that is a problem. And that problem is you, okay? If you have a 10% drop, this is the quantifiable metric. If you have a 10% drop in your call closing percentage over 30 calls, okay? And we'll talk about this a little bit more details on how to track your KPIs and your closing percentage on cold traffic, right? So if you have a 10% drop in your call closing percentage over 30 calls, so let's give you an example. Let's say you do 30 calls and you close 9 of them. So 30% is the KPI for cold traffic. All right. So when you're actually closing people you don't know, you should be able to close at least 30% of them. So 30% of 30 is actually 9 people. All right. So that's your normal thing. So for every 30 people you speak with, you close 9. But when you're in a rut, you're closing 6 people. Then that is a problem, right? Let's say if nothing changed, right? Marketing quality didn't change. The types of lead didn't change. How you're prospecting didn't change. Everything is exactly the same and you're just closing 10% less. Well, that means that you are in a rut because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're up and down with your sales performance, so your revenue will actually be up and down as well. And this is where we need to create stability with you, right? Get you back to performing at your 85 to 90%, right? To get you out of this 10% drop, right? To make sure that you can actually perform at the highest level. And so the only way that we can actually perform at the highest level all comes down to energy management to become a high performer. All right. And the reason why this is so important because the greatest athletes, the greatest business professionals, the greatest entrepreneurs all have the skill of energy management. And this is what allows world-class players in any game to dominate no matter what, because they're so conscious and protective of their energy. And for us, energy management as entrepreneurs allow us to perform at the highest level because entrepreneurship is just a game of the mind, right? It allows us to stay out of ruts. It allows us to be conscious and be more consistent. This is why the goal is not only to have the best sales process, but also to have the best sales machine, which is you, where you're optimized and you're tuned and you're running on all cylinders. Now, why is this so important, right? Our goal is not only to give you the knowledge, but also to give you the deep understanding of the sales process so you can actually prepare yourself to become the best salesperson. So not only do you have the perfect script, you have the perfect process, you know exactly how to go through it, but you're also optimizing yourself to being a high performer and being able to show up as the best version of yourself. Because knowledge is one thing. The only thing left is actually getting the reps in. And you have to develop the identity of someone who can execute on the skills, right? And the entire team at RWA plugs away to make sure that the students have the right knowledge and the training to make your goals a reality so you can become the best entrepreneur that you need to become. And if it wasn't for the incredible team at RWA, we would not be able to bring you these amazing findings and resources to all of the students. So I just want to thank you for being an incredible student, for taking the time to actually delve into this and learn these things and actually want to get better, because not many people want to play the game at the highest level. They don't want to improve. They don't want to level up. And I also want to go ahead and thank the RWA team who's been plugging away to actually make this happen for the students. So we know that energy management is a superpower for the highest level athletes and for the business owners. Now, when it comes to energy management, how do you actually regulate it? All right. And there's 4 components that go into regulating your energy. Number 1, there's physiology. Number 2, there's clarity. Number 3, it's necessity. And number 4, it's inspiration. So let's actually break all of these down. So the first one and the most important one is going to be physiology. All right. Now, this all of you guys should already know. This consists of the 4 pillars of health, which is nutrition, movement, sleep, and recharge. All right. And this is accomplished simply by being a product of your product. All right. And this is how you'll actually be able to sell more and elicit change and transfer conviction. Because if you're unhealthy, how are you going to convince the other person sitting across from you on Zoom to invest into their health? It doesn't matter how incredible your mindset is. If your physiology is trash, right? Because all you're doing is taking what is internal and bringing it outside in sales. That's all it is. Because in sales, we transfer conviction. We transfer what we are feeling internally, right? Try to sell when you're not having a good day. It doesn't work, right? You will not close a sale. So like sales is a transference of state, because a sedentary, dehydrated, sleep deprived salesperson who's running on junk food and stressed out of their mind is not going to perform at the highest capability. Because when you are doing sales, you are performing at the highest capability because you have to show up and be more conscious than you've ever been. And that even mindset, right? Heck, mindset comes from within. Because if you're keeping the promises that you make to yourself and you wake up in the morning and you're feeling like trash, well, how's the rest of your day going to go, right? Because in order to be a high achiever, the first element that you have to take care of is your health. And if that is an area that you have been lacking in, this should be a reminder that in order for you to be a high performer, you have to take care of you. You have to be able to create more energy, because as an entrepreneur, all you're doing is transferring energy. You're transferring energy into your clients. You're transferring energy into your business. But if you don't have anything that creates energy, well, you're screwed, where you're going to be burned out. And that's why it has to become a part of your identity. You can have all the skills around health. You guys learned all the skills around nutrition, around sleep, around recharge, around movement. But if it does not become a part of your identity, right? It does not become a part of who you are. Getting 10,000 steps in or whatever it may be, or going to bed at a certain time, if it's not a part of your identity, then it's not going to allow you to create energy and get to where it is that you want to go. So physiology is the biggest and one of the most important pillars and components when it comes to regulating your energy. And it's not going to happen if you're just sitting around. It's not just going to happen. You're not going to get good at sales simply by learning the skills and the tactics. Yes, that will help you, but a lot of it comes down to who you are and how you show up. Because how you show up and the energy that you hold in a call does wonders more than skills, because a person who has more conviction in what they are selling will sell better than somebody who actually has more skills, because conviction wins all the time. All right. So that was the first component of energy management. The second component is clarity. So what the heck is clarity, right? Clarity all comes down to how clear are your goals and what direction are you headed in? Right? And so the question that you have to ask yourself, are you aligned with your North Star? Are you aligned with where you are trying to go? Have you updated your TBJ? Have you updated your North Star? The what? What you are doing this for? Do you get energy from your becoming process? Do you get energy from who you're becoming inside of your TBJ, who you've labeled out and who you've written down? Well, if you haven't been doing the TBJ, well, this should be a reminder for you to get back on top of it. Right? Because your North Star will help you determine where it is that you're trying to go, and it will motivate you on a daily basis. Now, the problem that people run into, number one, especially early entrepreneurs, and this is the mistake that I've made in my journey as well. Number one, your North Star becomes too big, right? So there was a point where I was making about $10,000 a month, and I was like, I'm going to make $1 million a year. Well, that's a great stretch goal, right? That's a great goal to have maybe 5-6 years down the line. But the problem with that is if you're at a point and your vision is too big and you don't know or can't see yourself getting there, right? It's going to motivate you and hype you up for a couple days. But because it doesn't seem realistic, the brain is just going to start planting seeds of doubt because there's no rhyme or reason or there's no path to actually get there. Versus when you are like, hey, I'm at $10,000 a month. Right? I'm going to get to $50,000 a month. That is something that's actually realistic, and that North Star will actually pull you a little bit more, right? The second problem that we run into is that the North Star is too small, right? Let's say you want to make $10,000 a month, or let's say your goal is to make $5,000 a month, but you make $10,000 a month. Well, the drive's not going to be there. You're not going to push forward. So what we have to do is we have to find this balance where it's not a stretch goal, right? Where it's too unreasonable and we can't think of getting to the other side, but it's not too small either where it doesn't pull you. All right. And like, this is why it's so important to be aligned with your vision, because your energy, right? Energy management is all about creating more energy and managing the energy that you have, because energy is neither created nor destroyed, right? You just use the energy that you have, and all we're doing is amplifying it, right? So taking care of yourself, right? Going from not being healthy to being healthy will create more energy, right? You'll feel better, right? Because obviously your body is functioning on all cylinders. And then the clarity is going to pull you more, which it feels like you're creating this momentum, but you're actually being pulled towards your goals. And this is the key, because as a human being, you can only push for your goals so much. There's only so much that you can push, because there's only so much that we have inside of us. That's why it's very important for us to actually be pulled by our goals and by our visions and by our North Star. And that's what's actually going to keep us going and staying consistent on our goals. All right. Now, moving on to the third component, we're going to talk a little bit about necessity. All right. And necessity is a very simple one. And it actually just comes down to the reason why what you're doing is so important, right? What is the why behind your why of what you're actually doing? Right? And most people are always doing things for two reasons. They're either doing it for one, selfish reasons, or unselfish reasons. It doesn't matter what they are. It could be as selfish as possible. It could be as unselfish as possible. People will tell you that, oh, having selfish goals is not a good thing. Have tons of selfish goals. Have tons of unselfish goals, because they're going to pull you. Okay. They're going to make you want to achieve your goals because you're creating the necessity of wanting to achieve them. All right. Now, moving along to number 4, which is inspiration. And this is going to be the most important one of them all. All right. Now, all of these things that you'll notice give you more energy from a mental horsepower perspective, right? What they're doing is you're increasing your output, the more that you can do. Now, all of these things are giving you more energy from a mental horsepower perspective, right? To help you increase your capacity. Now, your inspiration is going to come from the information that you consume, okay? Your inspiration is going to come from the information that you consume on a daily basis, because your inputs will determine your outputs. Always in life, your inputs will determine your outputs. So many times we hear people say, you are like the 5 people that you hang out with the most. Well, why is that, right? It's because those 5 people are determining your inputs. So garbage in equals garbage out. So if you eat like trash, well, what are you going to get? You're going to get trashy outcomes, right? Meaning you're not going to have energy. You're going to be dead all the time. You're not going to feel good. Your skin's going to break out, and you're just going to be bloated all the time. I'm just using that as an example. I'm throwing stuff out into the open, right? But if you consume garbage, right, you're doom scrolling on the internet, you're watching negative news, well, what do you think your outputs are going to be? Most likely negative, because we're just going to regurgitate what we're actually putting in. And so the goal in sales is we are influencing others out of their current situation and into their desired situation. And that will take energy, all right? And we cannot influence someone in the external world if our internal state is all screwed up, right? Because some of the most successful people in sales, right, they're resembling who the prospect wants to become, right? You have to show up as the best version of yourself because you're painting the picture of who the prospect can actually be. That's why it's so important for you to be a product of your product, because influence and convictions comes from who you are rather than what you say, right? Because the information that we take in, if that's empowering, the more we're going to cultivate our internal state. And that is what's empowering the inside and increasing our ability to influence the people on the outside. Because remember, your internal state is a reflection of your external reality with a delay, right? So we want to avoid bad inputs. Now, what are bad inputs? I'm just using this as an example. I don't know if news is bad. I don't personally watch news, but news, right? Negative people, friends or family members, all information that doesn't align with who you're trying to become, right? What are good inputs? Personal development, right? Audiobooks, motivational speeches, things that will help you grow and become the type of person that you want to become. So it's very, very, very important as an entrepreneur to control your inputs in general, but it's more important when you're actually doing sales, because let's say you're watching bad news and now your state is all messed up and you show up to a call and now you're pissed off, right? It happens more times than not and people don't realize it, because controlling your state is all about controlling your inputs, and controlling your life is all about controlling your inputs, because your internal state is a reflection of your external reality. All right. So moving along here, guys, let's talk a little bit about becoming a high performer and what that actually looks like. So now you understand the concept of energy management. Okay. And now we want to go back and talk a little bit about how do you actually become a high performer? How do you actually manage your energy and make sure that you're staying out of the rut, right? Because the whole goal is to not only manage your energy when you're in a rut, but also be able to do this consistently time and time again. Because you shouldn't just be focusing on these things when you're in a rut. You should be focusing on these things on a daily basis. So the way you actually measure your energy management is with something called an end of day journal. And if you're doing this personally for yourself, and you're the salesperson, then we recommend doing and calling it an end of day journal. If you have salespeople doing it, and this is when we've had our sales team, we actually have them do a end of day report. So the way you actually manage your energy and measure your energy is with something called an end of day journal. And this will actually allow you to catch ruts early and allow you to actually start implementing plans to manage your energy better, get back on track, and really get back to performing at 85 to 90%. So if you are the entrepreneur and you're selling, then for you, we would call this an end of day journal. But if you have salespeople on your team, you would have them submit an end of day report and they'd be doing the exact same thing. And what you're doing in the journal is you're rating your energy from a scale of 1 to 10 in the 4 areas that we just talked about, right? Where we talked about physiology, we talked about clarity, we talked about necessity, and we talked about inspiration. So you're grading yourself. And if you get anything above an 8, right, you're performing really well. Anything below a 7, you're at risk and you're about to hit a rut, or you're already in a rut. And now we have to make sure that we get you out of it. And so when you're doing this for yourself, you have to be brutally honest with yourself to get an accurate assessment. So now this brings me to my next point, which is how do you actually grade yourself, right? Let's actually talk a little bit about that. So the way you determine the numbers is through a series of questions that you're going to ask yourself, right? And all the questions are broken down into the 4 components of energy management, all right? So what we've actually done is we went ahead and created a worksheet for you right here, which you can get access to. You can just make a copy of this and you can fill this out every day as your end of day journal. You can have a running Google Doc to do this. You can do this in ClickUp. You can do this in whatever tool that you want to utilize, all right? So let's actually look at the questions that we're going to ask ourselves. Now, these questions are a little bit different, but it's very similar of what they look like inside of the journal, right? So the questions you want to ask yourself with your physiology is, am I getting enough sleep? Right? Am I waking up on time at a consistent time? Am I getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep? Right? Consistent wake up time, consistent sleep time. Right? Am I following a healthy diet? Am I drinking enough water? Am I moving on a daily basis? Am I exercising? Am I getting movement? Am I getting my steps in? Whatever it may be. Am I meditating on a daily basis to actually clear my headspace? Right? What am I doing to actually recharge if that's what I need? Then going into the vision. Did I review my TBJ today? Did I write out my intentions for the day? Right? Is my vision inspiring? Is there a gap? Am I being pulled? right? Do I have an idea of how I'm going to close the gap to get to where it is that I want to go? I'm at $10,000 a month. I want to get to $50,000 a month. This is what I need to do to get there. Do I know what it is that I need to do to get there? All right. If not, then I'm going to reach out for help. Necessity. Can I think of a reason why, selfishly and unselfishly, why this is so important to me? And do those reasons give me energy? If they don't, well, I'm going to need to change those, right? And then when it comes to inspiration, am I doing morning gratitude, right? Am I being grateful for waking up with my rituals and doing the things that I want to do? How many client wins did I read today? Did I review the client wins that I got? Am I being grateful for the clients that I have? Right? What am I listening to in the morning? Am I watching the news that's affecting my state, or am I listening to a podcast that's filling me up? Right? Is there anything in my environment that's causing me to be negative? All right? That's putting me in a negative state? My friends, family, relationships. Is there any hard conversations that I need to have? Because hard conversations take up a lot of mental bandwidth. And people don't realize this because they're like, oh, I want to be a high performer, but you have this thing just eating at you in the back of your head. Now, one thing I do want to remind you guys is all of this is a skill, guys. At the beginning, you did not know that energy management existed, right? Now you have conscious incompetence where you're like, whoa, I'm putting all of these into effect. I don't know if this is working for me. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Just stick with the process. Keep doing your end of day journal. And then eventually it'll just become conscious competence. All right. And then if you keep doing that, you'll be at a place where it's unconscious competence, where you can grade yourself and already know that, hey, am I in a rut? Am I not performing where I need to be performing? Am I not at the pace where I want to be? And you'll be able to get there. But all of this is a skill. Now you have the knowledge, guys. All you got to do is put the reps in and actually do the journal and actually do the dang work. So that way it actually becomes a skill, so you can self-diagnose and make sure that you're performing at the highest level. Now, moving on, let's talk a little bit about high performance rituals. All right. Now that you know how to regulate your energy, the last thing that affects the performance of high achievers is their rituals. All right. And what rituals allow you to do is they kind of help you raise your standard. They help you raise your goals, right? Because you can set goals and standards for making money or having better relationships or getting better health, but many people fall short, right? And it has a ton to do with identity, right? Because people don't focus on who they need to become. They just focus on what is it that they need to do. But the rituals actually play into the things that you actually need to do, right, to become the type of person that you need to become. But many people fall short because, yes, they identify the identity, right, but they don't figure out the rituals that they need to do to get into the right state of their identity, right? Because who you are becoming has to do with the rituals that you follow on a daily basis. So for example, when you're doing an action or completing an action, that's when rituals actually come in handy, right? And that's why we need rituals for sales to put us in the right state. All right. Michael Jordan, before every game, used to lace up a fresh pair of shoes. He used to do it himself because that is what allowed him to get into state. Tony Robbins actually does a spin. He claps and does a spin backstage before he goes onto stage, and that puts him into a state. That is his ritual. Dwayne Wade likes to work out and shoot in the practice gym alone. That is his ritual. And so rituals are something that is done to prepare you for a specific action. Okay. And in our case, the specific action is sales. And so we need to have specific rituals and habits that actually put us into the right state to perform the action. Now, habits are something that we do repeatedly. Rituals are something that we do to get into the right state of the action that itself, right? So if we're about to run, we've got a ritual that's going to allow us to perform the way that we want to. And the most successful people have the highest standard, and they back them up with rituals, right? Because rituals get them into the state that in which they want to be in. And so Tony Robbins talks about this a lot. He says, show me your rituals and I'll show you your standards. And then you show me your standards and I'll show you your results. Right. And so an example of a morning and evening ritual to get you in the state and make you successful during the day with your sales is, let's say you wake up at a consistent time, you read, you listen to a podcast, maybe an audiobook for inspiration, you meditate for 10 minutes, you read your becoming journal, you get some inspiration, clarity, some necessity, you exercise, you get some movement in, right? Maybe you listen to some content, you do some call reviews, right? This is you listening to your own calls, which we'll talk a little about that, how to improve, right? This is what's affecting your physiology, and you're getting inspired, right? Maybe you're listening to some content, some RWA to get you psyched up. Then in the evening, you're updating your numbers, which we'll talk to you guys about, which is projecting and datas and KPIs for the sales processes. Then you plan your next day. You open up your calendar, you plan it all out, make sure you're organized. You have your end of day journal. So you actually close out the day. There's no open loops. There's nothing that's lingering in your head, right? Then you sleep at a consistent time. Right? Those are your rituals. You got evening and morning rituals to get you into state. All right. Now, you got to figure out what works best for you guys. This is all part of you becoming the version of yourself that is a high performer. Now, this is how you actually create momentum and you push the needle forward. And the whole goal with this is you need to have rituals to actually just win the day. Right? I heard this a very, very long time ago, and I've always wanted to share this with you guys. The whole point that we're going into this with is we want to win the day. And then if we win 7 days, you win the week. And if you do that for 30 days, then you win a month. And then you do that for 12 months, you win a year. And you do that for 10 years, you win the decade. But it all starts with winning one day at a time. And your rituals is what will allow you to actually do that. Now, will your rituals change? 100%, right? As you're growing, as you're evolving, as you're changing your identity, your rituals will change, right? But you need to have rituals that actually get you into the state to do the things that you need to do, right? And this is a constant process as you're growing. Like one of my rituals in the morning, I message Coach Yassine and I'm like, hey, you ready to win the day? And that is my ritual. And by sending that, what that does, it puts me in a state to absolutely demolish my day. All right. Now, the secret to being a high performer, guys, is just consistently showing up, having rituals that put you in state, following the rituals, even on the days where you don't feel like it, because the rituals are going to get you in the state to actually push through and do the necessary work to get to where it is that you want to go. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the perfect sales machine training section. If you have any questions about the section or anything that we discussed, make sure to go ahead and ask us inside of the student community. Don't forget, the community is there for you to give and for you to receive. So if you're asking questions constantly, jump in there and support the other students. Do some reviews, right? Help each other out, because that's how we grow. There's no guru on the mountain. All of us are peers. We are all helping each other grow in business. We are sharing our findings. You are sharing your findings, and we're all growing together. So with that being said, team, we're going to wrap it up here, and we'll catch you guys in the next training.